All right, welcome. It's good to see all of y'all. This is the Gudger Celebration of First Year Writing, it's a wonderful way to celebrate the good hard work that we do in Lang 120. We have a great program. Speaking of that, there are programs over there if you want to grab one, and there's pizza outside, and sign-in sheets. If your instructor wants you to sign in, you can do that. This is our faithful assistant, Cormac. Can you see if Sasha needs you to do anything? Okay. Okay, so I'm kind of like your movie host here. Make sure your cell phones are off. Stay for the whole show. It's going to be a good one. If you have to leave, though, to get pizza or whatnot, just time it so that you're in between presentations. And yeah, I'm going through my list here. All right, so for student presenters, you have to do what I'm doing, make the microphone, make that noise, and stand behind the podium so that you can be in the light and that you can be heard from the microphone. If you haven't already, there's a media release form to sign so that we can broadcast this good work as well. And then just relax because we're all here to enjoy what you've done, and really the hard work's pretty much over. What else? After your presentation, maybe pause a minute and see if there are any questions, because a lot of us have projects that produce really good discussions. So pause for a minute and see if there are responses or questions from the audience, and then we'll move on. When you guys come up here, introduce yourselves maybe and say which class you were in, and then your presentations will be on the computer, or you can log in and things like that.
And also.
Yes, and if you haven't signed in, please do, according to Cormac. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jessica Pisano, who is our writing program coordinator, who knows a lot about the hard and beautiful work that goes into writing and Lang 120 and the work that we have to give to the world. Okay, thank you.
Hello and good evening. Thanks all of you for being here. This is an amazing turnout, and I'm really excited that you're here to watch each other, to support each other. This is wonderful. Thank you very much. I had this whole thing written out, but I'm not going to read it because I think we really just need to get going and see your presentations. What I do want to tell you really quickly is that the Gudger celebration, what is Gudger and where did that originate from? Years and years ago, there was a first-year writing instructor named Peggy Jo Gudger, and she wanted something to be able to celebrate the amazing work that first-year students were doing, right? We've had undergraduate research day where the upper-level students get to share their research, but she wanted something for you. She started a essay contest, which we've turned into a multimodal presentation celebration, so that we can just celebrate all the work, all the research, the revision, the peer review, the revision, the conferencing, the revision, right, that has gone on this semester. That's all I'm going to say. Just a big thank you to everyone for being here, for all the work you've done, for making it this far in the semester, to your professors who have spent so much time, dedicated so much of their lives to you and your writing this semester, to the Media Design Lab crew, to the library, the research librarians, to everyone who has made this possible. So thank you, and let's begin.
So hi, my name's Ariel.
And I'm Lily, and we are in Professor Johnson's 930 class, and our class decided to do a video about what we've learned throughout this semester as writers and thinkers.
And really quick, just a shout out to Alexis over here. She edited the whole video for us, which is like pretty crazy. So we can just give her a round of applause. The reason we decided to do a video is that we wanted to do something that could incorporate all of our voices, all of the different perspectives that we came from, and how we're each going on the same track now. So we just wanted something to show how we continue to empower each other throughout the semester, and we felt that this would be a really great way to do so. So enjoy our video. Do we just press it here? Where we're from, where we're brought up, where we're going, and how it transitions to who we're becoming. So with that said, I am from Red Wings and Crisp Mountaintops.
I'm from the great state of Texas, the Lone Star State, from the coast, shooting stars over the sky.
But I'm from visiting my grandparents like every weekend, and you know, church services that run over.
All right, so my name's David, and I'm from Greenwood, North Carolina, about 5.5 hours away.
My name's Charlie. I'm from South Africa.
I'm Akeem Williams. I'm from Raleigh, the Raleigh area.
And I'm from a town with collard greens, a love for collard greens, love for lifted trucks, and a love for ignorance.
So I am from a large family, a household of chaos and honesty and encouragement.
I'm from a place where everyone's running late or either they have no watch.
I'm James. And I guess well, first off, I'm from Charlotte. That's the place where I'm actually from. But one of the things that the rhetoric that my parents always told me was sorry doesn't cut it.
Research. I did my final paper about guns control versus in South Africa and America, just because I think I'll give a good outside perspective, and especially international students can relate.
I did my research project on spoken word and how people can use it to necessarily, let's say, find their inner self and help their self-identity, because I feel like that's what a lot of people struggle with these days.
I felt the research project was the first time I was at least challenged to actually find reason and think on my own and think critically.
Research, I'm doing something on digital activism and the effectiveness of it.
I chose something that's kind of controversial. I chose gun control, and I decided to look into the emotions people feel about it.
Searched a lot of different ways as to how vulnerability impacts us. So the power of it, how it builds trust, how it helps teams, how it builds a stronger work environment.
My research kind of focused on empathy and how if we were more empathetic, maybe our world would be a better place. We could understand each other and listen to each other and use our language in a way that's positive and uplifting and not negative and demeaning.
Focused on the psychological appeal of horror movies is what I talked about. So just kind of tracing back what it is that causes us to want to spend. It's kind of pricey to go to the movies nowadays, but to go to the movies and watch a movie that's frightening. And
I'm gonna go somewhere.
That's where I'm going.
And
going next.
I'm going
An exact planned out future. My goal in life is just to try and reach my full potential, and that's what I'm going to try and do. My major is actually mathematics, so probably not have too much languages for my future, but yeah, that's it.
I don't know what I'm going to be, and I think that's okay. I feel like that's part of what I learned this semester is it's okay to not entirely be sure, and I don't know, it's all process.
Be the best I can be and continue to progress as a person, because that's pretty much anybody wants to do in their life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, with all us being student athletes, we kind of share the same thoughts.
Right.
So,
Yep.
I am going in a way that continues on a journey of health and self-care, and maybe inspiring and impacting those around me to hold those same values.
Just continue going through life with a smile, a good sense of humor, and help people along the way. Maybe I'll end up on a beach somewhere.
I think I want to continue my electrical engineering degree.
I want to go somewhere with many opportunities, somewhere where, like she said, anything is possible and everything's very positive.
I'm going to continue that path of self-discovery because it's something that I've worked on, especially in like the last year.
Below that layer is that we're human and that we can just actually understand and accept each other rather than have that kind of barrier.
As you said, it life's uncertain. You never know where you're gonna go, where you're gonna end.
You just gotta pick something.
But I guess I kind of understand now, like, the importance of not letting yourself get trapped in like a bubble of just people
Like
that
an
you
echo chamber.
Yeah, the people that just constantly like affirm you. And I guess that's nice.
I'm able to think about it from a perspective other than my own.
Thank you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Cool. Well, thank you.
I think I made the noise. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name's Olivia Alpert, and I'm in Jennifer McGaha's Lang 120 class. And I'm going to log in real quick so I can get my project for you guys. Okay, so today, hopefully, I will be giving you guys some food television for thought. Our English class kind of focused around food culture as a whole, and I chose food television for my research topic. I'd like to introduce my topic to you by stating my thesis statement from my research. So, from acting as mindless entertainment, creating bad food habits, or being a medium for creativity, food television is a platform for many reasons. I don't think I would be presenting here today about this topic if it weren't for these two really influential food television personalities and chefs. So here we have James Beard and Julia Child, and they acted as pioneers for the food television industry and paved the way for modern-day food television personalities and chefs. They wanted to give their audience a lesson more on the love and history behind food rather than just the ingredients themselves. So, what is food television doing for its audience? Some might say that it is just acting as mindless entertainment. Frank Bruni, who is a food critic and writer for The Atlantic, states that food television is put out there simply to entertain. So that's kind of what I look like when I'm watching food television most of the time. Another thing that food television can do is create bad food habits. As dietitian Lizzie Pope states, people who watch food television are oftentimes associated with having a higher body mass index. And there's a nice meme for you guys. Food television can also act as a medium for creativity. In an interview with Alton Brown, Chris Weller mentions this Instagram era that we live in nowadays, where people can post pictures of their food and use that as an outlet for creativity. And as you can see, the plating and the way the food is arranged on the plate and just the colors can really be used to express someone's creative side and even be like a form of art. So speaking of Alton Brown, who is now called the modern-day father of food television, He mentioned in that same interview with Chris Weller that nowadays people who watch food television do not necessarily want some step-by-step process on how to make some extreme, extravagant meal. They more so want a step-by-step process on how to create a meal that will look great on social media. So here you can see I actually made this pie, and it turned out pretty on the inside, but I kind of burnt it a little, but it's fine. So, you know, why do we watch food television? Is it because we want to aspire to be better cooks, or do we just want to be entertained? Are we just bored? You know, that couch entertainment type thing. If the Cat in the Hat can do it, why can't we? That's kind of the mindset that food personalities and chefs like Ina Garten and Alton Brown want you to have. They want you to be inspired to get off the couch and go into your kitchen. They encourage everyday people just like me to, you know, go into the kitchen and make something. So that's actually why I was inspired to make this mini tutorial for you guys on how to make that purple sweet potato pie that you saw in the previous picture. So here's a little tutorial, and I hope you guys learned something. Hey everyone, it's me, Olivia. The first step to this purple sweet potato pie is to wash your potatoes to make sure any dirt and residue is off of them. Once they're washed, make sure to dry them as best as you can. Here's the fun part. Now you can poke your potatoes with a fork. This will allow the steam to escape them while they're cooking. After you're done with that step, put your potatoes in the oven at 400 degrees for 1 hour. Make sure your potatoes are decently cool before you try and cut them up and peel them. Once you have your potatoes in the blender, add the rest of the ingredients and mix until you have a smooth consistency like this. Pour this mixture into a pre-made pie crust and make sure to pop any of those pesky air bubbles. The air bubbles will cause your pie to crack in the oven, and we don't want that. Next, pop your pie in the oven for 25 minutes at 325 degrees. Then once it's done, admire your beautiful work. If you know anyone whose favorite color is purple like me, this pie would be great for them. Now we're not done just yet. The last step is to sprinkle mini marshmallows all on top of your pie and pop back in the oven until they're nice and melted. I know you're going to want to eat this as soon as it comes out, but it's going to be super hot. So just wait until it cools down and cut a nice slice out to enjoy. So that's all it took to make this beautiful purple sweet potato pie. I enjoyed this over Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone who sees this gives it a try at home. If there's some reason or some way that my favorite TV food television personality, Guy Fieri, could see this, I just hope that he would make a face like one of these. I hope he'd be proud of me. So, don't worry though if you're not a magician in the kitchen like myself. If you prefer to just stay on the couch and watch the pros do it, don't worry, food television can still fulfill its purpose for you. Like Ina Garten says, hey, if you can't summon the flames directly from hell, store-bought is fine. Don't worry about it. So food television has room to grow. It continues to educate and inform and, most importantly, entertain its viewers. The future is now in the hands of new stars and television personalities. Maybe one day, probably not, but it's okay. So that's all for today. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you were entertained. Thank you for watching. Here are my sources.
All right, good evening. Hello, how's everybody doing? My name is Brandon Buckles. I am representing Professor Shepard's Lang 120 class, and I'm here to talk to you guys about electric cars. Specifically, whether or not now is the right time to buy an electric car. Historically, electric cars have had a few trade-offs that most people have not been willing to sacrifice in order to own one. Things such as long charge time or short range. And if we go back a little bit farther throughout history, we find that electric cars actually predate the combustion engine by around 60 years. The first electric car was actually built between 1830 and 1840. The first combustion engine didn't come around until 1895. Now, obviously, we know at the turn of the century, electric cars died off and as combustion engines pretty much took over from there. I'm not going to go into detail about exactly what happened there, but a couple of key things that we can take away is that Henry Ford developed a manufacturing process to mass market them to more people, get more cars in the hands of the people. And because these were combustion engine cars, that kind of took over from there. Another key invention was the electric starter, because up until that time, people had to hand crank these things, and it was really, really hard to do. So those two things, with the greater range, the convenience of being able to refuel your car, they kind of spelled the end for electric cars for the better part of 100 years. We didn't really see any major improvements in the electric car again until the end of the 20th century. The rise of the hybrid. In 1997, Toyota released the Prius in Japan and a few other countries. It didn't actually come to America until 2003. But when it did come to America, it just blew up. They sold hundreds of thousands of units, celebrities loved them, and it was promoting them. It was basically free advertisement at that point. And of course, a lot of other companies actually grabbed a hold of that and decided that they wanted to, get into the whole hybrid game as well. And so people like Ford and Honda in particular, they would actually take cars that already existed, such as the Civic, and make a hybrid version of it. It was pretty easy for them at that point. It gave them the best of two worlds. You could still have the range and convenience of being able to fuel up a car, but with the extra battery power, you could actually get a greater range out of it, and it was cleaner running. But the major development didn't come until Tesla showed up the next year. In 2004, Tesla started development on the Roadster, and it wasn't released until 2008. But two very large effects that Tesla had on the market was that it was the first all-electric vehicle to go 200 miles on a single charge, and it was also the first vehicle to use lithium-ion batteries. And this was big because up until that point they were using lead-acid batteries, which is basically a thing that you start up your car with. And in order to get one that size that could actually power a vehicle, it basically took up the entire frame of the vehicle, and it weighed upwards of 1,700 pounds. It was very heavy, very bulky, and didn't charge very fast. It didn't hurt that the Tesla was subjectively not ugly. It was kind of sporty. They used the Lotus Elise design body style. But the biggest problem was that it was still expensive. It was a new technology that kind of happens. It was as close as makes no difference, right around $100,000. And that's out of the wheelhouse of most people. But because they were marginally successful and showed that the technology was there, other companies such as Nissan, Honda, Kia, Ford, GM, BMW, and many, many others decided that they wanted to start kind of delving into all-electric vehicles as well, not just hybrids. And Nissan in particular was very successful. They released the Leaf. And today the Leaf is actually the single most widely sold and successful all-electric car in the world. That one car outsells all of Tesla's stock combined. But the charging was still a pain. Compared to going and fueling up your gas tank, which is right around 5-10 minutes, really depends on the size of your gas tank, most chargers, the ones that you would find in like a parking lot in the mall, which is basically just a stick in the ground with a hose coming out of it, those were very, very slow to charge most, even the smallest all-electric batteries. It could take upwards of 4 hours just to get up to around 70-80%. Now, there are 4 basic levels to these charging stations. The first 2 are basically what I just told you, a little stick out of the ground with a hose. And those ones are the most common, level 1 and 2, but they're also by far the slowest. Because in electric cars, a battery uses DC energy, and what comes out of the ground is using AC energy. So they got to convert it somehow. Inside the cars, there was this tiny little converter that would just take a really long time and convert and then charge up the battery. Then you've got the third level of charger, which companies like Honda and Nissan developed this, and they thought they were going to go ahead and just put that converter inside the charging station. So you got something a little bit bigger, much like what you got on this screen with the Tesla. And they've got these really large converters inside, so it just converts it for you and then sends it straight to the battery in the car. And by doing that, you can send a larger amount into the battery. And so with that, the Nissan Leaf, for instance, can go from 0 to 80% charge on these level 3 chargers in about 30 to 45 minutes versus 3 or 4 hours. And the level 4 is reserved for Tesla chargers. They have the biggest batteries, and so they need the fastest chargers, and they develop them themselves. So they've got a much, much larger converter, and with these large batteries, they still can go at about the same speed, 0 to 80% in about 30 minutes. And there's actually plans of developing within the next 2 years one that can do that in 15 minutes. Now think about that. The gassing up at the gas station, 5 to 10 minutes. For most people who actually want to get into the electric car, business, the market, and trade up, that's not much of a trade-off for them. I imagine most would be willing to, say, add an extra 5 to 10 minutes just to charge, especially if these are widespread enough that they can just charge up pretty much at any city that they go to. So, now taking it a step further, there are 2 companies in particular who realize that the technology itself is not the only thing that's important with electric cars. It's also the ecosystem. And Tesla and Nissan are those 2 companies. Now, Tesla is already a well-known energy company, not just a motors company. They develop house storage units. They got solar panels and stuff. It can reduce the cost to your home greatly for electricity over the course of time, of course. And they also do that at a large scale as well for cities. And Nissan's not an energy company, but they do have a deal with an energy company. OVO Energy is a British energy company based out of Europe, and they have a deal for 2019 for the brand new Leafs that come out. Anybody living in those areas who buys a new Tesla for 2019, who wants to get into this whole economy, this ecosystem, they can opt into OVO Energy, have OVO Energy be their energy company, and Nissan will give them a home charging unit that's 2-way. That means that once you're done with your day, you come home, you still got a ton of energy left in your battery, and you know that tomorrow you're not going to need much either. You can actually send a little bit of that energy back to OVO. And what OVO will do is they'll pay you for that. And the estimates are that most people, if they do that for a year and do it regularly, fairly consistently, can actually cover almost the entire cost of their entire electric bill at their house, which means it's basically free energy. And if you're charging up your car at one of the Nissan charging stations, those are free. So you're not spending any money. Now the money. Developing these cars, in particular the battery, is not cheap. Lithium-ion batteries, even for your phones in your pockets, they're pretty expensive. And in 2008, the cost of developing and building one of these batteries ranged at $1,000 per kilowatt hour of storage. Now, for comparison, it was estimated that it would need to be $150 per kilowatt hour to compete directly with the standard car today. Now, that was 10 years ago, 2008. As of 2018, we're down to $190 per kilowatt hour. And in 2 years, it's going to be below that mark of $150, which means it'll be cheaper to build and sell an electric car than it will be to build and sell your average sedan today. And let's see. Yeah, so with all that in mind, you've got charging stations that are getting faster and faster every single year. You've got battery capacities that are getting greater and greater every year. Tesla's up to 350 miles now. And with the cost of building them getting cheaper and cheaper every year, I say now is a really good time to buy one. But it's not for me to answer for you. What do you guys think? Any questions?
I got one. Do you know what the recycling options are for the batteries once they hit the max for their life?
I don't know for everybody, but I do know that for Nissan, with this in particular, Nissan doesn't just want to do this power relay. They also want to take old Nissan Leaf batteries, which a lot of people think batteries of that size would go bad really quickly, like 10 years or so. They're actually rated for over 20 years. So by the time you throw your car away, the battery's still got half of its life left. So what they're actually going to do is start using those as home storage as well. You know how Tesla is like $15,000 for one of their storage units and everything like that. Well, Nissan knows that you've got a lot of life left in those batteries, so they're going to give them to you at dirt cheap prices just using these old batteries and have a home storage unit. You just need to cover costs of like solar paneling at that point. Yeah, not a problem. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much, guys.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Finn Prey, and I'm representing Mr. Graves' class. So in the beginning of my genre analysis presentation, I thought I would go in the direction of religious studies or something along those lines. But during my research, I found an article that really piqued my interest. It was an anonymous newspaper article, and I originally thought that it was going to be an attack on someone or something, so of course it piqued my interest. And what I found was that it was an attack, but it was more of a positive attack to promote ideas within a community that was being silenced. So you probably thought the same thing that I did in the beginning, that anonymity is just inherently negative and destructive. We see it every day with internet trolls, and we think of it as cowardly, and we see how it perpetuates libel and destroys careers. But in my research, I found that there is a more positive side to it. It's very concise in nature. It focuses on the message to clearly and effectively communicate what it's trying to say, and it allows a voice for marginalized classes. So anonymous writing is really just a genre that writes through the method of articulating a problem concisely with no author, usually responding to another text, and it has a group mindset that opens the audience up to any reader, even though it has an intended audience in the original article. So what I'm trying to say is that anonymous writing, just as any writing, can be taken advantage of and used for personal gain. But there are important messages within anonymous works that should be discussed. One of the positive aspects for the more influential side of anonymous writing is that it allows a voice for marginalized classes. Throughout my articles that I researched, each one of these has a marginalized class that focuses their issues and messages around it. Women's Work and Women's Values discusses the housewife and homemakers communities. Negotiating Needs and Lesbian Partners of Sexual Abuse Survivors discusses the sexual abuse victim communities and the LGBT community. And then Rights Are Not Limited in Supply discusses the LGBT community and the immigrant community. So for anonymous writing as a genre for its whole, is that even the negative side and the positive side, each are intertextual in nature. And that's the act of creating a conversation through writing by using other text to create a meaning and combining experiences and ideas. The negative side really uses intertextuality to be hateful and insulting, and uses it as an opportunity to discredit the community. Especially how if you post something or read an article, the negative side will usually just reply and respond to this by just insulting and discrediting the whole article. Whereas the positive side utilizes intertextuality for pathos, to create a credible way to make the community's ideas known, and to open up the audience to any reader. Each article I found was consistently concise, about 1 to 3 pages. It was rhetorically simple, and by that I mean I was able to find audience, purpose, problem, and claim all in the first couple of paragraphs. And the conciseness really transitioned into the focus on message. They focused on message to create a clear description of what they were trying to say, and they did this through brief discussion of the cause of the problem by referencing other articles. and they discussed the experiences of those affected by the problem. They did this to centralize their purpose and make their voice known. All right, so anonymous writing really should be considered more credible, even without an author, because this genre gives a voice to the voiceless classes. And especially in this political climate where people are coming forward with their struggles and their issues that haven't been heard before, people who are not a part of these struggles or issues still feel the need to criticize what they're trying to say. So when your community's issues are ignored, determined as invalid, the world puts other people's pain before yours. At a certain point, you won't be able to do anything except speak up. And this genre gives you the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Harrison Ungert, and I represent one of Ms. Pisano's Lang 120 class. And today I'll be talking on mass incarceration in the United States. I'd like to start off by explaining you a little bit about how this project came around and why I began to research mass incarceration. Earlier in the semester, Ms. Pisano's class went to the Burton Street Peace Garden, which is located in West Asheville. And it started in 2003 together with Dwayne Barton, who we had the pleasure of meeting, and Safi Mahaba. And this was their way of peacefully protesting the war in Iraq and the war on drugs here in the United States. So I love the Peace Garden because it was able to talk about we were able to see this uniqueness and talk about a uniqueness and show the human condition in a very different and original way. First glance, you see a lot of things like the picture on the left, where they just take toys or other objects and they repurpose it into artwork that was left to be interpreted. So I saw this piece on the left of a African American baby doll within a old TV frame, and kind of looks like a Target. It's like a stovetop. And my interpretation or my connection was immediately to the piece on the right, who was artist. She worked a lot during the civil rights movement. Her name's Elizabeth Catlett, and it's called Target Practice. And this piece for me created to show how the African American community or African American citizens here in the United States have been a target for injustice. Yeah. So the United States has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, and is often seen as a very brutal, racialized, and unfair system to minority groups or people of lesser income. Exact numbers change from year to year, but the number of people in prison in the US remains around 700 out of 100,000 people. There are more people in prison now than ever before, even as crime rates continue to drop down. So both the people who study crime and the people who write policies question if the social cost of incarceration exceeds the social benefits, especially for crimes that are nonviolent. So incarceration in the US is socially concentrated among African Americans. At birth, an African American male has a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. By comparison, a white male at birth has less than a 5% chance of going to prison. And that's at birth. From arrest to prosecution to incarceration, African Americans are singled out for increasing policing, from profiling to the types of crimes that are highly enforced. And black men are often charged and prosecuted differently than their white counterparts, and often can't afford proper defenses as well in court. Out of 125,000 federal inmates, 97% have been sentenced for nonviolent crimes. Prison sentences are also higher or also longer than seem reasonable. So there are 1.2 or 1 in 9 African American children born, or 1.2 million, excuse me, or 1 in 9 African American children born to parents who are in prison. So research shows that these children, especially males, have have decreased school achievement and higher rates of behavioral problems and depression than their peers. These male children often turn to criminal activity themselves, making incarceration an inherent trait. So these people become social outcasts because of their time in prison. As social outcasts, they have limited access to good jobs, credit, education, quality health care, and other means of improving their lot in life, unlike everyone else in society. In fact, according to a renowned sociologist that goes by the name of Bruce Western, he argues that it is not just individuals being put into jail, but whole social groups. We as a nation have created a deprivation of liberty for a group of people who in the United States have never truly been equally represented. So, people are jailed for nonviolent crimes and sentenced for possession of small amount of drugs. As I previously mentioned, out of 125,000 federal inmates, 97% have been sentenced for nonviolent crimes. Prison sentences are also longer than seem reasonable. Here are a few stats. So one of the big ones is the war on drugs. For example, federal law mandates a maximum sentence of 5 years without parole for possessing 5 grams of crack or 3.5 ounces of heroin. For less than 2 ounces of crack, an offender can earn upwards of 10 years, compared to 5 years for 500 grams of cocaine. 100 times the amount of drugs for half the sentence. Perhaps no coincidence, but most cocaine users are white and rich, and most crack users are minorities and poor. This proves the claim that the war on drugs was really just a war on minority citizens in the US. So, the contracting of workforce inmates in private prisons creates the demand for more prisoners. Money is made by the prison administrators and by the corporate stockholders who own shares of those prisons. Companies are laying off regular workers to hire labor from private prisons, where they can pay workers a tiny fraction of what they would normally have to pay. So this drastically increases the profits that companies can earn, with the profits specifically from employing prison labor tripling between 1980 and 1994. In state-run prisons, inmates usually work for minimum wage, except in in Colorado, which allows pay as low to $2 an hour. In privately run prisons, the inmates can earn as little as 25 cents per hour for a 6-hour shift, or about $20 a month. So this amounts to little more than slavery when the fact that most of the inmates are black and are black is considered. It begs the question, is this just a new justified form of human bondage? There is historical proof that this is true. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, many freed slaves were charged for petty offenses, often never proven, and then forced to work in cotton fields, mines, or to build railroads. This continued pre-war traditions when slaves were hired out by owners to the state to work on municipal projects. A quote by journalist Vicky Pelez summarizes it perfectly. Quote, "Profits are so good now that there is a new business, importing inmates with long sentences after a law signed by Clinton in 1996 caused overcrowding and violent, unsafe conditions in federal prisons. Private prison corporations in Texas began to contract other states whose prisons were overcrowded, offering a rent-to-sell services." So, end of quote. A strong profit motive ensues, the preservation of the current system. So as the prison industry complex keeps growing, crime is actually decreasing. But there's no correlation between the first trend and the second. In fact, there are so many individuals locked up in the US that the threat of prisons has actually diminished. The possibility of getting caught and facing prison time does not deter crime anymore or make us any safer. Evidence shows that a would-be criminal doesn't really think about the possibility of prison or being caught. Instead of discouraging crime, prisons actually tend to support criminal activity. The lack of proper rehabilitation, mental health care, counseling, and job training make it harder for society to actually re-assimilate these people, or re-assimilate prisoners. And so high recidivism rates ensue. So recidivism rates also reflect the failure of this attitude. The National Institute of Justice reports that in the US, 67.8% of prisoners were rearrested within 3 years of release. Within 5 years of release, that number goes up to 76.6% of released prisoners being rearrested. Recidivism, unfortunately, it is met with longer and harsher sentencing, truly creating a scenario of revolving door justice. In the US, political advantage is given to those who promise to be tough on crime. It is a perennial winning campaign strategy, and it fuels the building of prisons. Drug addicts and the mentally ill are locked up with hardened criminals, with little to no resources to help with their treatment or rehabilitation, or to make sure they do not re-enter prison. Prisons have been given the mandate to punish and not to treat, and corporations are making money from an increasing number of prisoners whose rights are lost in the system and whose voices are not deemed worthy to hear. The point of a business is to cut costs and improve efficiencies. When a business is running a prison, those costs, cuts, and efficiencies squeeze the individuals that are locked up. There's no business advantage to teaching prisoners to lead more socially responsible lives. Taking steps to preserve human dignity in such a setting is costly. In order to fix this, we need to start valuing the human being instead of exploiting them. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. As of right now, I think one of the largest ways to solve this problem is just going out and voting, making sure you know your candidate as well and how they stand on privatization of prisons and stuff. Like I said earlier, it's very politically based with privatization of private prisons. Have a lot to do with lobbying and relationships between certain states and certain people, and a lot of companies, big companies, use or pay to use these private prisons. Macy's, Boeing, IBM are just some of the ones off the top of my head that I can think. But yeah, also that's another point. Really diving deeper into what companies use private prisons and private prison labor can also help, and boycotting them are just some of the few small steps that you can take. Any other questions?
In your research, how far did you look into different presidential administrations and what impacts they had in the past on incarceration rates?
So in my research, I actually watched a documentary called The 13th. It's on Netflix right now. I don't know if any of you guys know it, but it dives way into the history of mass incarceration. Three that I can think of right now would be the Nixon administration, the Reagan administration, and the Clinton. They all had a pretty big part of this idea of the war on drugs and putting more and more people into prisons, militarizing our police. I think Bush was also another one that he actually won a campaign just because he was, this war on drugs and, harsher prison sentencing. So that's those people have had a lot to do. Another thing is this idea of a super predator that the documentary also goes way into. Just how we portrayed African Americans in society as being inherently dangerous and stuff like that. And so that also didn't help with us putting more and more African Americans in a prison. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, hello, my name is Rose Sink, and I am representing Dr. Chess's Lang 120 class. And I would just like to thank Dr. Chess and Leslie Johnson and every single one of you for the opportunity to turn what was a research paper into something a little bit more than that. I'll be talking about summer camps and group dynamics and the role that isolation plays in both of those. And I was inspired to do this topic because from one line of Judith Shulowitz's The Sabbath World, and that is the book that we read as a class. And in this book, Shulowitz discusses the capital S religious observance kind of Sabbath, and the lowercase s, maybe just not checking your email for a whole weekend kind of Sabbath. Essentially, both just require devoting an amount of time towards something that you might not usually do. In turn, there's greater time for self-reflection and just growing your community. So the actual line that inspired me, I'll read in full. The value of camps for indoctrination lay in their isolation, and their being cultural islands, which allowed them to create alternate societies without interference from the dominant society. And when I first read this, I just had to stop because she so beautifully puts into words something that I have been trying to define for most of my life. You see, when she says camps, she is referencing summer camps. And this top image, I'm the one in the middle standing up, and I'm 6 years old. It's my first summer at a summer camp, had the straight across bangs. And then from 6 to 14, I grew up at that camp. The bangs went away, thank goodness. And then the past 3 summers, I have worked there as a canoe instructor. And what she puts into words is what my coworkers and I call the real world. Because working at a summer camp, you really do feel like you're in an entirely different world. And I'll try to summarize that. It would take a million pictures to show you what camp life is actually like, but I'll try with these 4. The image in the upper left-hand corner is of our executive director, and he spends the most time with the outside world, but he also spends a lot of time on the tire swing. He leads climbing trips and paddling trips. You start to know what day of the week it is by if you're going to the pool or the lake, or if you're going hiking. You are constantly surrounded by nature. You probably smell like campfires and sweat. And it's really difficult to fit into the really demanding dress code of camp life. It's either athletic or like tacky, but then tackier than that. And when this is all you know, you feel so isolated from what's outside that. And this becomes blatantly obvious on Fridays, which is when our campers go home, and as a staff, we go out to eat. I'm sure we turn a few heads. We probably still look a little bit tacky, probably smell bad. But essentially, when you go out into the real world and you've been isolated from it, you're just like a sponge trying to absorb all of this information. Like what movies have come out. I can't name a single movie that came out this summer. I just have no concept of that. So that led me to the larger idea that maybe if I'm spending all of my days on the river instructing mostly good campers down some pretty nice whitewater and hauling their butts out of the whitewater, which that's at least the second most important thing that I do and the second most frequent thing that I do. Maybe my summer camp experience could also be a Sabbath experience, because I'm obviously building a community and I do have that time for self-reflection. So I just wanted to look into that in my research paper. However, there's obviously no research that says like summer camp equals Sabbath. So I did what Shulevitz often does, and I just looked into the history of summer camps and the observable effects that they have on people who experience them. So I started with the origin of studies on group dynamics, and this arose with social group work in the 50s and 60s, which essentially says that different styles of leadership make different group dynamics. So if I was yelling at all of you, you'd probably be pretty jumpy, right? And I looked at 2 social psychologists, Muzaffar Sharif and Kurt Lewin, and they did cool studies, but what really matters is that they were able to do those studies by using summer camps. They were 2 of the first people to study group dynamics because it's so hard to subject a group to the experimental process. So they were able to do this because summer camps can be so easily manipulated to produce desired outcomes. So thinking about that, that's pretty cool if you're a social psychologist, but that's also really cool if you're a summer camp. Or the American Camp Association, which accredits hundreds of summer camps across the country. And essentially, they have a mission to foster campers' growth and development. And they did the study between 2001 and 2004 titled Youth Development Outcomes of the Camp Experience. And they did this to see, what actually are the effects of summer camps on kids? And how can summer camps as a whole better reach the kids that they are trying to help grow? So they looked at 4 large developmental categories, which are highlighted in yellow, and all of these saw large improvement, and that improvement was sustained 6 months after the camp experience. And then they also looked at 10 subcategories, and I believe 9 of those also saw that same sustained growth. However, it was really interesting because stuff like the experience of the directing staff or the experience of the counselor didn't really matter with the growth of the child. So what did matter was specific programming that directly targets some of these topics. So my camp is religiously affiliated and therefore would see a higher growth in spirituality. My camp is also an overnight camp, and in general, those had better scores with physical and thinking skills. So this is great for camps because they're able to see, okay, we want to make kids better leaders. We should have some sort of program that directly addresses that. But it's also great for parents because if you specifically want your child to grow in a certain way, you can check with different summer camps and see if they have a program to do that. Lastly, as a country, we send millions of kids to summer camps each summer. However, a lot of them are not financially accessible. So if so many kids are going to summer camp and those kids are being positively impacted by it, if we start seeing camps as something essential for the development of a child, maybe as a society we can level the playing field and try to get everyone to have that same positive impact. And I also just want to ask all of you to look at your own life and think about something that you might do that could also be considered a Sabbath experience, and try to give that the attention that it deserves. Thank you.
You talked about a lot of the studies and stuff that were done. Were there any direct results that you found? Like, say a kid went for, leadership skills, or they were a little bit too shy and were trying to develop their social skills. In your findings, did you have any direct results that came out of that? Like a child that was observed in one of these studies, like what was the result like when they went back to school or when they went back to their family?
Well, this study, it used camper surveys, but it also used parent surveys. So the parents were sent a separate survey 6 months after the camp experience where they would, fill out on a chart how they think their child is doing. I'm sure that there are studies like that, but the one I looked at was very general. Does that answer your question?
Not entirely, but I understand why.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Any more? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, we're from Professor Johnson's 8 a.m. Lang 120, and we're going to show our collaborative project for you.
But prior to that, we kind of just wrote something to kind of just introduce it. So, first off, I'm going to start off. Now, I know we all love getting our sleep, right? But I also know how hard it can be to get the right amount of sleep every night. So, whether we wake up at 6 a.m., 6:30, 7:30, or even the occasional 8, my peers and I, on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, still have our Lang 120 at 8 a.m. with Professor Johnson. Now, this presentation is kind of a compilation of our words, our pieces in which we have created throughout the duration of this course. And these words are what we wish to share with you today. Now, despite oftentimes not really talking during class, we're hoping this presentation kind of compensates for that.
Yes. We've all worked super hard, waking up early, feeling the weight of morning, starting off the days, sometimes with stuff to say and sometimes with nothing at all. Throughout the good days and the bad, we've still worked hard and pushed through. In the early mornings and the late nights, we've been developing our own styles through the constant evolution that comes with writing. This collaborative presentation showcases all that we've done this year, highlighting our personalities within our work. Our collaborative presentation is titled, "We Woke Up, The Evolution of Our Words," which begins with lines from our recreation of the I Am From poems that we wrote at the beginning of our time together, followed by pieces that we all created throughout this semester. Here it is.
My name is Taylor. I am from Italian Dinners with Grandma and Wonder Bread with Pop Pop. I'm from a time of many movings and football games with the salty smell of concession stands.
I'm Anna Scrid. I am from riding through the brush of the woods, listening to Mother Nature roar like clockwork. I am from hard work and determination, where no is never a stopping point. I am from hours upon hours of practicing on the court, training for what's to come.
Hi, I'm Owen. I'm from my father's curse words when he stubs his toe, bangs his knee, or burns himself on the stove.
I'm Nicholas Grandstaff, and I'm from Hillsborough, North Carolina, where I'm too much of a country boy to hang with the city slickers and too much of a city slicker to hang with the country boys.
Hey, I am Zane, and I am from behind the camera and the one smoothly moving the pen in my hand, where every curvy word describes all my blended emotions.
Here to talk about some Lang 120. What do you think you guys are going to remember about this class?
I'll probably remember how early I had to wake up and come to this class, but it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, same, all the late nights, and I remember that I have at 8 a.m.
What do you guys, or how have you grown as a writer, do you think?
Not so much as a writer, but as a person, which made me a better writer. Just having a different perspective on things and learning what language I can use to convey the ideas that are in my head.
For me, I had to like figure out like different like textures of writing to be able to like get my point across and like go further into my research or further into my story, and it like helped, I guess, like open that up.
Us as students to be able to provide like genuine work instead of like having to kind of pretend in case like, or just to do it for like a grade. We can do it for ourselves.
Like in the past, I would just kind of like be like, oh, I'll just read my paper once and submit it, call it good.
Yeah.
But like after like talking about it more, like the more you revise, and if you go over it more than once, you just see like new ideas that could fit, like mistakes or like more things you could add and, you know, like elaborate on. So I think that will help me.
I cared about my topic and I like really couldn't like let go of it. Like I actually ended up totally changing my like thesis at one point and like totally getting new research because I was like, I can't do this, you know, like this would be like a sham if I were to like just continue with this. And that I think was like the whole research thing. Like I had to look at it and come full circle to realize that like I needed to work something different.
I agree with that.
I did my research on animal testing cosmetics, and I created a website called Cruelty Free Friends where I basically gave background information on animal testing and ways that you can help.
Hey, I'm Ryan. I researched the Eastern and Western cultural divide between philosophies and cultures, and for my project I ended up recording a podcast that was about 25 minutes long, and we discussed everything ranging from Siddhartha, the book that came out in the 20s, to more modern philosophies concerning Alan Watts.
I am Kendra Mingo, and I researched overcoming emotional abuse by using creative writing.
I'm going to reach my goals no matter what. My blended emotions, nor the man who is called the President of the United States will stop me.
I'm going to a small town 41 mile away. Mask made of glass, I will approach. I'm Shira.
I'm going to be a mindful person and an eminent student and will be diligent in everything I do. Kendra Mingo.
At first, when I like wrote the piece and like she looked at it, she was like, oh, there's like more here you could talk about. Like there's more to the story I can tell. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to talk about this. And then like I kind of like opened up more and was able to like talk more in depth about it.
At first, I really didn't want to. I was just curious, so I didn't want to go in depth as much as I did. But what I found through digging deeper was pretty interesting.
What will you take away from this class?
Like revision strategies and just other writing. I don't know if the word's techniques, but like just ways to like organize and like make a good paper. And I guess like revising is like done through that as well.
Definitely going to the writing center and the professor and other college students as well, getting their perspective has helped me look at things in a different way when revising.
Being able to like go after something you care and then also like come at it in whatever, in like the form that you want.
Yeah.
You know,
You can attack it from a different angle than what you've seen.
Exactly.
Are there any questions? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mara Shepard, and this is my video presentation on Nelson Mandela, and my teacher is Ms. Bassano. The Burton Street Community Association is located in West Asheville and was established to promote the well-being of an historically African American neighborhood. There is a portrait of Nelson Mandela in their Peace Garden. Nelson Mandela was a wise visionary, a political leader, and influential civil rights activist who had a positive impact not only in his home country of South Africa, but the entire world. He explained that there was no particular day on which I said, henceforth I will devote myself to the liberation of my people. Instead, I simply found myself doing so and could not do otherwise. The apartheid system in South Africa in the 1960s allowed for racial segregation as well as economic and political discrimination against non-whites. Laws restricted socializing between races, banned non-whites in the national government, allowed for public facilities, the educational system, as well as land to be segregated.
We have made it very clear in our policy that South Africa is a country of many races. There is room for all the various races in this country.
Mandela said, if there is one lesson we can learn from the struggle against racism, it is that racism must be combated and not discreetly tolerated. He believed that people having the opportunity to live in harmony was worth fighting for, and more important than preserving his own personal safety. In 1964, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Prison provided Mandela with time to reflect, and from a situation of such constraint and limitation, allowed him to consider the most effective form of action. He said, "It is never my custom to use words lightly. If 27 years in prison have done anything to us, it was to use the silence of solitude to make us understand how precious words are and how real speech is in its impact on the way people live and die."
Well, the fact that you could sit alone and think gave us a wonderful opportunity to change ourselves, your behavior. I felt quite ashamed because I became busy with politics and with law, and I forgot that the people were very kind to me when I arrived in Johannesburg. And I said, if I ever get a chance of coming out, as I was sure I would eventually, no matter after how long, I would make up for the omissions I made.
Over the span of several years, Mandela persistently wrote letters until he was able to see the South African president and begin negotiations. In 1993, the pro-apartheid legislation was appealed. By the next year, Mandela became the first African president in a democratic election for South Africa.
I accordingly take great pleasure in announcing the election of Comrade Nelson Mandela to the post of president.
In South Africa, there is a cultural belief called Ubuntu. It can be understood as the ethics of interconnectedness between individuals and the natural environment to ensure people's well-being, dignity, and livelihoods. The concept is based on the recognition of diversity, that we are only people because of other people. Nelson Mandela is thought by many to be the personification of Ubuntu. He said, "The purpose of freedom is to create it for others." Mandela made an impact in the US because in America in the 60s there were civil rights marches, boycotts, sit-ins, and arrests, which mirrored civil rights protests in South Africa. He has also influenced American politics.
I believe in Nelson Mandela's vision. I believe in a vision shared by Gandhi and King and Abraham Lincoln. I believe in a vision of equality and justice and freedom and multiracial democracy, built on the premise that all people are created equal and they're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights.
The Burton Street Community Association is involved in social enterprise, art, and environmental projects that were created to improve the community. These projects follow Mandela's approach for creating a better society through community action and involvement. His portrait lies in the Burton Street Community Garden because the garden is a place of collaboration, recognition, and peace.
Any questions?
Hello, everybody. Can we all just take a deep breath? And out. Okay, that was for me, not for you. Okay, so my name is Shannon Copeland, and I am representing Taylor Sykes' Lang 120 class. And we did autoethnographies. We analyzed an in-group that we were a part of. Alcohol is the perfect solvent. It essentially dissolves the life of the alcoholic as a whole, but that is not just exclusively for alcohol. It's really any addictive substances in general. So that being said, I want to talk about my mom. So I am the daughter of a substance abuser and an alcoholic. My mom started exploring with different drugs before she even graduated from high school. She whizzed through college with flying colors, either completely wasted or extremely high or a combination of the two, and still ended up with 3 degrees somehow. She was so book smart, just the common sense wasn't exactly there. One of the 3 degrees that she received qualified her to become a physician's assistant, so that was the first job that she had when she graduated from college. She met my dad, later on had my brother Tyler, and then 4 years later had me, and our relationship stayed strong for a really long time. While my parents were still married, while they still lived together, my dad sort of sheltered me from her attitudes and from her addiction. I found out that I was a member of this in-group when I was 10 years old. I was spending the weekend with my mom. It was 4th of July, and she actually overdosed that night, and needless to say, it was a pretty traumatic experience for me. When my dad picked me up, that was probably the longest ride home I'd ever had. He did his best to kind of explain the idea of addiction and how it was holding my mom captive. And that was the night that I kind of realized my relationship with my mom was never going to be the same. By the time I was 13, I could kind of pinpoint and figure out when my mom had relapsed. As my mom, I know that she would never do or say anything to intentionally hurt me, whether it be physically or emotionally. And I figured out that when she was under the influence, it wasn't her talking, it was the drugs and the alcohol. She had made a few comments over the years that really got under my skin, but there was one day in particular where it was just kind of the last straw. I was sick of it. She had made a couple comments about how she thought I was overweight and extremely depressed. And what she didn't realize is that my depression was me just trying to cope with the whole situation. And I had a really hard time handling it. And it was a decision that I really never wanted to make, but I eventually decided to cut contact with her. I really didn't want to, but it definitely felt necessary. My grades were slipping. I was feeling depressed, and I was having a hard time finding a reason to smile, which really just isn't like me. In a recent study conducted in Eastern India, 30 children of alcoholic parents and 30 children of non-alcoholic parents were analyzed to identify potential effects of parental addiction on their children. And they found that in the child's relationship with the mother, things like indifference, neglect, rejection, and symbolic punishment were only present in the child's relationship with the addicted mother. Other characteristics include lower levels of family cohesion and higher levels of conflict, which of course, those lower levels of family cohesion is just the politically correct way of saying that nobody wants to be around an addict. So that's why I decided to separate from my mom. And unfortunately, she passed away when I was just 16 years old, so 2 years ago, before we ever really got a chance to build our relationship again. But I've definitely learned to cherish the time that her and I spent together, although it was pretty short. A common misconception of members of my in-group is that we never have a relationship with our parent, which at least in my case is absolutely not true. Through all of my mom's struggles, we definitely had our mother-daughter moments. We went to Carowinds, we went to the Renaissance Festival, we did all sorts of science experiments at home. We mixed the cornstarch and water to make that oobleck mixture where it's a solid sometimes and a liquid sometimes, and then we would bust glow sticks open and add the glow stick liquid. That was just the kind of stuff that we did. But one of my favorite things about my mom is that whenever a family member or a close friend was upset, she wouldn't ask you if you were okay. She wouldn't ask you to talk about it. She would simply go to the store and get what she liked to call warm and fuzzies, little craft balls. They were all different sizes. They had tinsel on it. And she would leave little bowls of them on your dresser, or she would leave some on your pillow. She dumped an entire bag in my book bag one morning before school, and I had no idea. So that was just the kind of stuff that I like to remember my mom for, not the addiction. In a way, I am pretty thankful for the person that she was and for her addiction, because it taught me so much about myself. Since her passing, I did whatever I could for the longest time to sort of distance myself from this in-group. I didn't want to talk about whatever was plaguing me, and I certainly didn't want anybody at school knowing that I had a crazy mom. And because of my isolation, I never really felt like a member of the in-group, or at least not oftentimes, and that was kind of the point. But as time passed, I definitely have come to realize that it's not the worst thing in the world, because in a society where drugs are prevalent, a true knowledge of the dangers of being roped into addiction is exclusive to members of my in-group and closely related in-groups. So to wrap things up, I kind of want to leave you guys with a little quote or an idea that I think is very applicable to my life and will be to yours as well. And that is, the parent's life is the child's classroom. Whether it be positive or negative, there are always things that can be learned and observed. I've learned as my mother's daughter what kind of mom I want to be, what kind of wife I want to be, and watching my mom make mistake after mistake and continue to smile through all the pain is definitely a characteristic that I want to inherit. And so it's things like that that helped me cope and eventually accept my membership into this in-group. Thank you. Questions? Okay.
Hi, I'm Isabel Coletti. I'm in Professor Graves' Lang 120 class, and my project or presentation will be the narratives in ethnographies. So what is an ethnography? An ethnography is the research paper or scholarly writing that an anthropologist would do after fully immersing themselves within a culture. They write about their experience, and then they talk about maybe a conclusion they came to based off of this. So the narrative is the story of the anthropologist when he first comes into the culture, how he interacts with people, because it's more than just the facts of like what the culture wears, what their religion is. It is more about like the social aspect of a culture, you know, what really makes it unique. So Bronisław Malinowski is one of the first one to introduce the narrative. Before, they would try to do detached kind of observations of a culture, and often it was done by like white guys, so they were often probably patronizing, like they don't know what they're doing, but they're running around without clothes on. He talked about how you need to actually immerse yourself into the culture, you know, interact, and become kind of not like one of them, because you're always going to be kind of not there, but really understand what their culture is about, what they value. So why a narrative? This is actually a quote from Malinowski. His whole introductory paragraph is kind of a how-to do like an ethnography. He talks about how you would never in chemistry or physics, not talk about all the things you did in an experiment when writing a research paper. So in a less exact science like ethnographies, you would try to do the same thing, the lengths of time devoted or the observations that were made and what the manner of the observations were. And that's where the narrative comes into play. You talk about a story, how you got there. Often, with these stories, this is from Malinowski again, is what it was like when you first got there, how you were an outsider. And then your narrative usually can slowly develop into how you became trusted by the culture, and often this explains what the culture values, what they wanted to see from an outsider to really accept. And so the stories also provide credibility. As a reader, you want to see that what you're reading, the author is actually researched. That's why a lot of authors quote other people, like, yes, I did research, these are other things I found. It's the same with the narrative. You talk about, I was actually there, I actually talked to people, and this is why I came to these conclusions based off these observations. This guy, Geertz, talks about cockfighting in Bali and how it was like a really big part of their culture and their masculinity, and this is why men devoted so much time to their roosters. And it's funny because, right now I'm showing how he first got there and nobody accepted him. It wasn't until he joined the people running away from the cops after a cockfight that the culture was like, yeah, you're one of us, you're running from the law and fighting chickens. This is actually our own Professor Woods of anthropology. He went to Gabra, or the Gabra tribe, and his research or claim was that, he really wanted to know why, what nomadic tribes thought about boundaries. A lot of companies were coming in, drilling for oil, and what the people thought. And so the best way to conduct that research, instead of saying, I asked this and this was this, is he talked about the story, how the people began to trust him, what he observed, what the people were doing, interacting with the oil companies, how they saw themselves as a nomadic tribe. And so the narrative becomes very important in understanding the research and fieldwork done, and the opinions of the anthropologists themselves. So for example, freshman culture. Last year, throwing bananas places weren't a thing. People ate bananas. But this year, it seems like people like to leave bananas places, especially on top of the Mills dorm building. And so you could just say, well, you're just saying that. But if I gave a narrative of my own experience, it might be more credible, and it would also come to be like, why do you think they leave bananas everywhere? Well, this is one of my pictures. It's almost off campus, but right on the edge, someone's like, yeah, I'm going to leave a banana there. And so my narrative would be, one day after work, I'm driving up and I'm parking because I have to run to my dorm room before I park my car somewhere where I won't get a ticket. And it's kind of dark because it gets dark really soon now. And so there's these girls, and they're about to throw a banana on top of Mills, and then they look at me because I got my brights on, right out on them, that caught them on the spot. And I said, do it. I don't care. And so they did. And that's where I kind of learned, wow, this is really a thing. People are really throwing bananas places. So that is my example, something you guys might more understand on where I'm going, where the narrative really helps the credibility of the author come to the conclusion where people don't eat bananas anymore if you're at UNCA, and that's my conclusion. All right. Thank you. Any questions about where these bananas are going?
You think it's a metaphor, or what's going on there?
What, with the bananas?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a freshman anymore. You don't get it either? Yeah, I mean, why even have them if you're not going to eat them? Decoration. All right.
So a little bit of background story before I start this presentation.
I was originally going to do a research paper on how we communicate emotion through text, specifically through the internet and through different forms of social media. And then when we were in the library learning how to use Google Scholar and how to find credible research sources, I typed in 4chan because I thought it would be funny and I didn't think I would find anything. There's a lot of academic research about 4chan. And so that's how I ended up here. And a lot of us grew up with the internet, especially if you're a freshman. And you may have come across 4chan or Reddit or heard of the red pill or incels. And if you haven't, we'll cover them, so don't worry. Something we often don't consider are the psychosocial effects and dangers of anonymity and harm that can be done to ourselves or others. So first, a quick note about the Red Pill. It's a community devoted to liberating men from a life of feminist delusion. And the name comes from the movie The Matrix, where the main character, Neo, is given the choice between two pills. The blue pill, which is to live in the fantasy simulation, stay oblivious, live blissfully ignorant. Or the red pill, which is, wake up, know the truth, see what's really going on. And for a transphobic, sexist, misogynistic community to use a metaphor from The Matrix is kind of ironic because the directors are in fact transgender women. There we go. So we all experience these social relationships and these social groups, whether on a large scale or a small scale. Online, these groups have taken the form of message boards, Facebook groups. You may be a member of a Facebook group for maybe your graduating class in high school or even your graduating class here at UNCA. Or your mom might be a member of a Facebook group for like her knitting club or your neighborhood. And we're going to look into how anonymity online affects these relationships. Online, and especially on social media, we create our own safe spaces, for better or for worse. It's easy to block someone you don't like or someone dangerous with the click of a button, or unfriend someone, or even just not reply to a message or a comment thread. If you only want to see news or posts from your family, or even just pictures of raccoons. With the tools we've been given, we have the power to create and nurture our own online spaces. So 4chan is a messaging board created in 2003. It's infamous for kind of being gross and awful. For purposes of this presentation, I'm going to be mostly just talking about the board B, which is the random board, if there are users of 4chan in the audience. Psychologist Joe Dawson describes 4chan as the putrid basement of the internet, serving as a hub for racist, homophobic, grotesque images and text. Users are known for trying to one-up each other, disgust and troll new users, and show they have the lowest threshold for decency. So the Stanford Prison Experiment was a 7-day role-play study conducted with 24 participants who didn't know each other. The goal was to investigate mainly the psychological effects of perceived power through hidden identity. 12 were selected as guards and 12 as prisoners. They were given costumes, the guards were given sunglasses, hats, anything to constrict their recognition and identity. Some guards began to get aggressive, even abusive, realizing they had this newfound power over their prisoners. Soon enough, other guards joined in an effort to give the researchers something to work with. And midway through this experiment, several prisoner participants had left, and the experiment ended up being terminated on the 6th day because it was just not good. So bringing that back to the internet, the Stanford experiment helps prove that the internet itself, or these websites like 4chan, aren't inherently bad, but using anonymous identities and allowing ourselves to become disconnected from our online identity can lead to aggression, hateful or vicious speech with virtually no consequences. Another cyber psychologist, John Suhler, describes this as the online disinhibition effect, the phenomena of flaming and acting out online behaviors that often involve damaging others or one's self-image without any beneficial personal growth. Anonymity in a social setting means that peers and other users only know what the speaker is willing to let on or even lie about. This is a principal factor in toxic online behavior as it removes accountability and causes dissonance between the user's internet actions and their real-life actions. So this is my favorite part, incels. It's a portmanteau meaning involuntary celibate. It's a community of mostly men who use 4chan or anonymous forums like incels.me to complain about how they're too ugly to be attractive romantically or sexually, and they believe that this is society or the world against them, and that they were just born this way. According to a linguistics study published in 2018, the most popular keywords on the forum incels.me refer to gender, physical traits, internet slang, and other common words like negative words like hard, nothing, never, uncertain adverbs, maybe, probably, and why, and pessimistic emotions. So what do we do about problems with anonymity or toxic forums and things like that? Do we restrict them? Are we able to interfere? Is there anything really that we can do? We'll never be able to regulate the internet and still allow freedom of speech. As we can see from Zimbardo's study, which was the Stanford Prison Experiment, humans will be humans. Dissonance in groups and social identities are so ingrained into the bones of our humanity. We have to foster healthier systems. More moderation on anonymous forums, better access to online therapy, or even requiring anonymous forums to register with a username. As a society, we should do better, and as humans, we can do better. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Finn Carter. I represent Dr. Ray. And today I'm going to be talking about some reasons why we should be editing the human germline and really what genetic editing is as a whole. I'm sure you've probably heard of maybe CRISPR or genetic editing. Recently, some things happened just a couple days regarding CRISPR and genetic editing. So what is genetic editing? Well, to understand genetic editing, one must understand the genome, essentially understanding DNA. What does DNA do? As you may know, it involves traits like hair color, eye color, height, several things. So therefore, genome editing is the editing of DNA. Now, genetic editing has been in use since about 1974 when the first animal was genetically modified, which was a mouse. In 1982, the first plant was modified, which was tobacco. People more recently have discovered that we can edit the genes of humans, and this is using CRISPR. This is, something you may have heard of. Now, what is CRISPR? Well, CRISPR was first developed in 1987 by a Japanese scientist to study the E. coli bacteria. Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, along with a team of scientists in 2012, discovered that it could be used to genetically modify people, or at least change their genes. So with that in mind, before I continue, let me get back to what the germline is. There are two types of genetic edits, somatic and germline. Somatic editing ends with the subject, meaning it does not pass down to future generations. What I'm focusing on is germline editing, which is typically done in a human embryo, which means that no matter what you do within a human embryo, it is a germline edit, meaning that it passes down to an embryo if they become a person, their children. So obviously passing down genes has a pretty massive implication, and I think they are good implications. So why should you care about germline editing? Well, when we're speaking about germline editing and really genetic editing as a whole, most people are talking about editing out genetic disorders. With germline editing, you may essentially eliminate or erase genetic disorders from the human genome. Future generations won't have to deal with these disorders, And it allows people to have children in situations that they otherwise couldn't. Perhaps both parents carry a recessive gene for cystic fibrosis. There will be a 100% chance that they will have a child without cystic fibrosis using CRISPR. Now, opponents of CRISPR argue that there already has been an option for parents in this situation, which is true. This is PGD, which is often used in tandem with in vitro fertilization, or IVF. Now, PGD, which stands for pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, has been in use since 1989 when the first IVF baby was born. The way PGD works is you are given an array of embryos, and you are essentially told, let's say you are diagnosing for cystic fibrosis. This embryo will have a 10% chance of developing cystic fibrosis, et cetera. And in some situations, it is extremely effective to the point where there is no chance. So that's the gist of what PGD is, but I believe CRISPR can do this a little bit better. Like I said, with PGD, you are often given a chance of inheriting a disorder. It's not 100%. CRISPR, on the other hand, would be you essentially just edit out the gene and there is absolutely no chance. Another big problem that kind of rises from PGD is that you are picking embryos, picking embryos rather than just treating one, which could be deemed unethical in of itself, and that could be fairly traumatic to a parent who is having to, pick over several embryos, all of which represent potentially a completely different person. Another kind of thing that I think a lot of people in the US would deem unethical that has been used with PGD is using PGD for basically choosing the sex of your child. There's been documented cases in places like China and India in which they choose male embryos. CRISPR, you can't change, your sex. Furthermore, there are technologies that are currently being developed to further analyze these embryos. As in, with PGD, you'll be able to understand your potential baby's hair color, eye color, height, various traits, which kind of throws out the argument of not using CRISPR, the designer baby argument, which is probably on a lot of people's minds. So to get to the designer baby argument and why, really, the designer baby argument as a whole is somewhat of a myth. So yes, while designer babies are based in fact, it isn't as black and white as you can make a very intelligent and very strong person. Traits like skin color, intelligence, physical ability are all what are considered polygenic traits, meaning hundreds, if not thousands of genes are involved in your skin color, your athletic ability, your intelligence, which means it would be very hard to engineer a white embryo, which is, when people are talking about CRISPR, we're typically talking about eugenics. So, and on top of that, really, with intellectual capability and athletic ability, studies have shown many times that things like intelligence and athletic ability are heavily relied on nurture, how you grew up. If you grew up in an environment that, stimulates intellectual growth, then you probably will be a little bit more intelligent. But let's say you have for athletic ability, for example, one of you could have had, the gene makeup to be the best weightlifter in the world. Perhaps you've never lifted a weight, ever. You won't ever be an Olympic weightlifter. There's a huge amount of nurture involved with things like intelligence and athleticism. So it's not as simple as just making an intelligent embryo. So anyway, to get back to my final point on why germline editing is, I think, a positive thing, is that with the elimination of genetic disorders comes a large amount of money for us in our healthcare system. So I just have two examples here. Cystic fibrosis, there are 30,000 people affected with cystic fibrosis in the United States. It costs $1.1 billion per year. Hemophilia, with 20,000 people affected in the United States, costs $100,000 to $350,000 per year per person. This is a massive amount of money for 50,000 people, and this is only two disorders. Another example for hemophilia, in Portugal, there are 800 people affected with hemophilia. It accounts for 4.4% of their healthcare costs. That's a lot. So there's this huge monetary, kind of incentive to edit out these genetic disorders. And this isn't just, I'm glossing over the fact that a lot of these disorders, and this brings me to my conclusion, a lot of these disorders really are somewhat terrible. So with more research, CRISPR could provide the end of suffering from genetic disorder. Genetic disorders like cystic fibrosis, you have an average lifespan of 37 years old. Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, average lifespan of 27. I know someone with cystic fibrosis. He spends 2 months a year in the hospital getting his lungs pumped, and he knows he's going to die in 10 years. I think if we had the capability to eliminate these disorders, I would argue that it's almost unethical not to. Further, it provides a viable option for parents, over PGD, and it allows more money for healthcare. And that's all I have for you guys. Thank you very much. I'd be willing to take questions.
There must be repercussions to removing a part of your genome. What are some of the arguments that have come up in your study?
The main argument right now is that we simply don't know enough. There must be some repercussions. We simply don't know if there will be repercussions. So I should have clarified a little bit more. I'm not arguing right now we should be genetically altering all the babies. In fact, I'm arguing against that in the end, because that's kind of we simply don't know enough. I don't know if you've heard, but just a couple of days ago, a person in China claims that, and I'm not sure, there hasn't been a whole lot of evidence. To me, it kind of sounds like a hoax, but he at least claims to have edited 2 embryos and birthed them to be resistant to HIV. The huge backlash is essentially that what could happen to them. They didn't really edit anything insane. It's just a gene for HIV resistance, but we simply don't have any idea right now. There needs to be much more research. CRISPR is a much easier, and it's essentially, there have been ways to genetically edit in the past, and I didn't focus on the actual science behind how it's done, but from what I've gathered, CRISPR is essentially like almost a do-it-at-home kind of like level of
right,
easiness.
That was the method that
yes, they did use CRISPR for that. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Arden.
I'm Amber.
And we're representing Professor Johnson's 1230 class. The title of this piece is Rough Draft 244, and that's partially because our entire class is focused on revision and editing and growing from your own work. And the 244 part is partially because we've written so many revisions and drafts that it feels like there's been 244, but also because our classroom is room 244, and that's where all of this happened.
I am from reluctance to speak your mind and to cherish old traditions.
I am from street lights and fireflies, from softball fields and late nights.
I'm from a long history of English degrees, from creative writing and PhDs.
I'm from growing towns, crowded highways and busy streets, from loud, hardworking and caring. I'm from bad love and too much understanding.
For my research project, I did a topic on the stigma of the fashion industry and how it's not just something for skinny rich people. It's also a huge creative process behind it, and it's also for everyone. And it can actually help boost things like self-esteem and even help with career opportunities and first impressions.
My name is Amber James. I did my research on veterans coming back home from war. It was really important for me to do this because I know that there's so much about mental health, but there's also not a lot about physical disabilities. And my father is a veteran, my best friend's dad is a veteran, I know many, many veterans. So it was important to me to kind of bring light to the fact that yes, there is mental health problems that we need to address in veterans, but
there's also physical disabilities that aren't talked about, and the way that we talk about them needs to change.
For my research project, I decided to learn about a genre that I feel was very important in sculpting the landscape of current cinema, classic film noir. This is a genre that I had very little experience with, but I had a lot of fun taking out the time to learn more about it. I read textbooks, newspaper articles, books, and I watched a few films from directors like Orson Welles, Howard Hawks, Carol Reed, and Alfred Hitchcock. The product of my research was a best practices guide to productive film noir viewership, and it can sort of be applied to any genre. This was a really great experience because I've always been very fond of neo-noir films of the 80s and 90s, but I've never taken time out to learn about the background of the genre and classic film noir.
I did my research project on misconceptions about mental health and the harm that comes with labeling. For my final project, I read a Shel Silverstein-inspired children's book about my topic.
My name is Arden Stockdale-Giesler, and I research children's books with hard realities. Children learn through literature, so why shouldn't we be passionate about what that is? In this research process, I became so moved that I ended up writing a children's book of my own. The inspiration for my piece, Wings of a White Butterfly, stemmed from my passion for creative writing, my personal experiences with hard realities, and my drive to be the person I needed when I was younger.
Reading an article in Rolling Stone magazine that ended up developing into multi-layers of research and ultimately became a photo essay.
So what will you remember about Lang 120?
Yeah, I've definitely discovered my voice through this class by making my writings more personal and vulnerable than I ever have, as opposed to being in high school and writing formulaic essays for the classes. And I really admire that.
One thing I really remember is the story course.
I think just how comfortable the environment was. It was really easy to share stuff we've written and stuff with each other. And I
enjoyed our instructor. She let us have an open idea to what we wanted to do in the class, which I thought was, and take part in a lot of the things ourselves and decisions. So I think that was good.
How have you grown as a writer this semester?
I think I learned that, revision doesn't have to be super stressful, and it can lead you to really, really cool, important things, like with mine.
I'll take away a lot of information on how to set up an infographic and get on the computer and find resources.
Question is, what have you learned about the practice of revision?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've discovered that it's a never-ending process for me personally. I always am finding, something new to add or something new to revise that doesn't quite, work out the first time the way I thought it did. And that's just a new way of thinking that I had never realized before.
What were some of the pieces you created that made an impression on you?
My favorite, or one that really made an impression, was the Little Library, because I got to throw back to my childhood and think about books that impacted me when I was younger and possibly made me the person I am today.
Why do you like to write?
Because I want to meow meow.
I am going to continue to taste the chlorine on my lips and force myself to grow stronger through hard work in the pool. I am going to grow as a student and obtain a plethora of knowledge that will prepare me for my future ambitions of becoming a lawyer.
Forward and never looking back to the things I cannot change. I am going to look for the positive things in life.
I'm going into the next semester applying what I learned,
Since my major is not just numbers, I feel my foundation is set in stone.
I am going around the world, or maybe to the stars. I don't know the destination, but I know I'll go far.
And we would like to thank Lily and Mackenzie for making that amazing video for us, because they did that themselves. Are there any questions or? Okay, cool.
So, thank you all for coming. That was great. Have a good night. If you're sitting in a black chair, if you will help carry that out and put it on the rack. And also, if you presented and you're still here, I have a certificate for you. Okay? Y'all have a good night. Good luck with exams.